Hello, this is your friendly Iron Yard instructor, Ben Starrett, here with a supplemental lecture on the Fetch API. So today we're going to be using some pretty simple fetch functions to retrieve JSON data just like we did in class today with the XML HTTP request. Now fetch may not be evident as to why it's an advantage over XML HTTP requests. In fact, it may seem like an unnecessary complication. But I assure you that as things grow, as the complication of your app, as your app becomes more complicated, the need for something like fetch becomes readily apparent. So to begin things, we have this URL here. This is an API of sample user data. It's all fake, I'm pretty sure. I hope. I got it from a fake API website. So we're going to be using this. So it's a list of 10 random users. So what we're going to do is we're going to fetch that list of 10 random users. Okay? Think of fetch, obviously, like it's named. It's named pretty appropriately. If you have a dog who's playing fetch, it's going to get a bone. We're going to bring it back to you. Right? It's pretty convenient. Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky. So what we need to say after we fetch our response object is after we're finished. That's what we do in this then callback. So fetch returns a promise. And remember that promises are designed for you to be able to perform synchronous actions after a synchronous request. So then is whatever is inside this argument here is the thing that's going to be run whenever you get a response back. Okay, so this is going to spawn an asynchronous action. Then when it finishes, it's going to execute this block here. Now, the first thing that we had to do with an XML HTTP request, if you remember, we were like xhr equals new XML HTTP requests. All right, and then remember it was like xhr.open get. Well, let's do single quotes. So this is the same thing here. So let's see, XHR version and fetch version, okay? So we had xhr.add event listener, load, function data. First thing we did here was we had we could do this, we say data equals json.parse data, okay? And then we could say console.log data. All right, so let's comment this out, run it. Forgot to send it. All right, let's try it again. Uh-oh. What are we doing wrong here? Maybe our console will give us some clues. Uh-oh, syntax error in our JSON. Are we not getting JSON back? Let's do it again. Run. We are getting JSON back. What's this T object? Success is true. Why are we sending two requests? That's awfully strange. Definitely did comment this out. Let's see here. We run, rerun. Let's add some console.logs. Hello. Let's make sure we're sanity checking here. There we go. We are logging that. There's got to be something simple I'm missing here. Let's see. Inside the event listener, run. The plot thickens. So we're inside the event listener here, but we're not logging any of our data? Okay, well let's do this. Let's console.log the data before we reassign the data. Oops. This is live programming with Benjamin. So what is this? Is trusted. This is, oh, you know what? I'm silly. I remember now. I remember now. It's mixing together promises and fetch API too much. So let data is actually, what we got here is the this.response text. There's where it is. Silly Benjamin. And I forgot to log it. Console.log data. There we go. There we go. Perfect. So it only took like 3 tries, but this is the XML HTTP request version of the exact same thing that we're going to do with fetch. Okay, so we have our object. We're going to configure the object to go to our users. We're adding an event listener. And then, let's see, let's get rid of this hello. After we add our event listener, we submit our request. Okay, so let's look at the same fetch version. So this is gets issues a GET request like above. After the GET request comes back, we run whatever is inside the then argument. So then specifies, it's a method that specifies what function should run after our fetch is complete. So whatever we do here is essentially what we do with the response that we get back. Now, the way that the fetch API works is you actually have to interpret the response that you get back. So the easiest way to do that is to say, well, here's the function. Okay. When we get a response, what we're going to do is we're going to turn that response into JSON. This is roughly equivalent to what we're doing here, right? Which is why I got confused and put the data in the parameter instead of using this.response text. So fetch will go and get whatever is here, and then when it's finished, and let me comment this out so I don't accidentally keep running it. When it's finished going to get here, it's going to come back. It's going to go fetch that URL and come back with the information for you. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to say, hey, whenever you finish, we're going to run this function with whatever what you came back with. And it has this useful feature called, or useful function called .json, which will parse the results, and we're going to return it. Now, what we're returning here is actually another promise. Hang with me here, because it's super easy to use. It's a lot harder to talk about than it is to use, but it's actually pretty straightforward to use. When we're here, we have access to the data that was processed here, right here. So we're going to go get the data, process the data, and then use the data. So we have function data console.log data. Run. So you see this does exactly the same thing that we saw before. This is the data that we got from the URL endpoint. So to recap, again, we use the fetch method to go and retrieve our data. We use, since this returns a promise, we can use the then method. Then, its job is to run a function whenever the request is complete. So this is the function that will be executed when the request completes. The data that the request sent back will be sent as the parameter here. We're going to take that response, we're going to convert it into JSON, and return it. That generates another promise that we have another then tied into. So this then retrieves the data from data, which is processed up here. We're going to just log it and call it a day. Okay? So in an example this quick, I mean, this does exactly the same thing that this did. And you might think to yourself, this is much more straightforward than this. And I think you'd be right. If the majority of all web requests were a straightforward GET request, then I would agree 100%. However, the reality is that many times you'll want to use like maybe 3 different requests or do something if one in particular fails. And you'll see here, if you look at the documentation for fetch, it's actually pretty cool what it uses. So here is a very similar to request, the request to the one that we just ran. So it's going to fetch the request, whatever request it may be, and then when it finishes, it's going to run this function here. So if you can use the response to take a gander at the response code. So if it was a successful response code, we're going to parse it as JSON. And if we get here, we realize that, oh man, this isn't a 200 response code, which means something went wrong. And then, if we get down to here, we successfully continued our request. So we can actually do something meaningful with the response data. If we're here, this is catch method. It's a lot like then, but it will only run if we have a problem. Like if something goes wrong. If the status code isn't 200, it's going to land down here. So this is a very easy and expandable way and readable way, mind you, that we can use to separate our successful data from our unsuccessful data. And when things get more complicated, you really need a more scalable approach to how you process these AJAX requests. So fetch is capable of actually handling post requests, put requests, and delete requests as well. But to get yourself started, I would practice just doing the simple get request with no special headers to begin with. Okay, this is your supplemental video lecture by Benjamin. Thank you for stopping by.